Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's show, we welcome back a good friend, REEzilla2005, from over on Reddit, No Sleep. And as ever, please do let me know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid crew. And so, with that aside, let's get into tonight's story. Entitled, An Apex Predator. Part 1. Let's get straight into that. The white fluorescent bulbs above both of us buzzed loudly. The man in front of me stared blankly ahead. He showed no remorse, no emotion at all actually. And when we found him, he just stared forward, not saying a word. It was unsettling. Like a doll, the movements he did make were unnatural. When he ate, it felt like he was trying to imitate a human. His skin was discoloured and his eyes were a little too dilated. His mouth hung open, showing his rotted yellow teeth. His brown stringy hair hung over his bruised forehead. No matter how hard I looked, he just never looked human. I stood up from the cold metal chair that I was sitting on. Samuel Monroe, correct? He nodded his head slowly. He never broke eye contact. Samuel, your fingerprints were found at 16 crime scenes. 2 of those were near schools where several eyewitnesses confirm your appearance. My only question is, how did I do it? He said coldly, no emotion detected. He pointed his finger at my badge. Your badge holds no authority over nature. It is natural for predators to hunt prey. I prefer to be at the top. While you may fancy yourself the top of the food chain, you are not. How can you be at the top when you kill nothing? It's about sending a message to the prey. They need to know their place, he said, and this time smiling. It was so unsettling to see. It was so human yet so not at the same time. And I shivered as he burst out laughing. A cruel laughter like a bully in a courtyard. I see you now know your place. You, sir, are nothing more than a tool used by the predators at the top of the food chain. I will get out of here if you let me out, or not. He sneered, dragging his claw-like nails across the desk, creating a noise which caused me to wince in pain. I opened my eyes in fury and pulled him out of his chair and up to my gaze. You think this is some sick fucking game? Children are being mutilated outside their homes, I hissed. He laughed as I threw him to the ground. He stood up quickly, too quickly, and I placed my hand on my revolver, but decided it was not worth losing my job on this monster. I sighed and left the room as he gawked at me. There was still one person I could talk to about this. His name was Jack McPhee, a survivor of this chain of mutilations. I got in my car and drove over to the hospital to meet with him. And the nurse was kind enough to lead me to his room. It was terrifying to see him in this state. He was hooked up to all the machines you could imagine. His face was bandaged up to only showing portions of a skinned red face. His lips were cracked and dry, breathing into a large white ventilator, which made the sound as it rose and deflated. He beckoned me in with a 3-fingered hand to sit next to him. I took a stool and sat down. My name is Detective Matthew Corrin. I have a few questions which you could write on this pad for me. I handed him the notepad with a black Sharpie. He picked up the Sharpie with his other hand and started to place down random dots. Dot, line, line, dot, line, dot, line, dot, 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 line, line, dot, line, line, line. I stared in confusion as he dropped the Sharpie and handed back the pad. He began to cough blood and the machines began to blink rapidly. I took that as my cue to leave as several nurses and doctors ushered in with their white coats flapping behind them. I exited the hospital and walked over to my car when I heard a strange noise coming from the woods. It was so distinct, like the wind, but there was a thin sound between it. No, it was a voice. I leaned closer to the forested slopes of the hill that the hospital stood on. I drew my handgun and aimed with my flashlight hovering above the barrel. I saw something move in the bushes. "Show yourself!" I yelled, and the rustling stopped. And from the bushes I heard a soft whisper. "Matt!" the whispering voice said. I stared in confusion as I turned my back to the woods. And I heard a twig snap loudly, and I whirled around with my gun aimed at the noise. I realized I could not take my eyes off the forest, and so I backed into my car, got in, and sped off back to the station. When I pulled into the station, I could immediately see that something was wrong. The tempered glass windows were smashed and the patrol cars outside were vandalized. I got out of my car in a panic and ran inside, and everyone was dead. Blood and brain matter splattered across the walls like Picasso paintings. Organs were hung from broken portions of the roof. I couldn't scream. Whatever had happened to them would happen to me if I did. I stepped carefully through the dismembered limbs of my fellow co-workers, and with tears in my eyes and my heart pounding. A hand grabbed my ankle, and I shrieked loudly. I turned to shoot the damn thing, but I only realized it was my friend Henry, bleeding out on the ground. Half of his body was missing. He was only alive because the remaining portion of him was being held under the weight of a fallen vending machine, holding the remaining organs, keeping him alive. I couldn't look at him like this and turned my head away and fired my pistol. I looked back to see a smoking window in his head from the bullet, and I continued walking through the building, sobbing loudly and looking for survivors or people who needed to be mercy killed. One man had his head shoved through the window and with a glass shard sticking all the way through his throat. Another man was hanging from the vent by his intestines. I heeled over and vomited harder than I ever did, until nothing but clear bile was spewing from my mouth. I gagged and choked on the putrid smell of rotten flesh. After 20 minutes of vomiting, I fainted. I woke up to find myself lying in the clear vial and quickly got up. It was dusk outside and I realized that nobody came. Why would they? No one survived long enough to call for help, and we were in the countryside. I weakly crawled for the phone, only to realize that it was ripped apart, wires spewing out like the organs of my dead co-workers. I realized I needed to go to a nearby house to use their phone, and so I ran outside, got into my car, and drove off. I arrived at a household and knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again, but then I heard a commotion going on upstairs. It sounded like they were struggling. I kicked the door open and ran upstairs to help, only to hear the window smashing. I burst into the room with my gun drawn, only to find the old couple dead on the floor, barely resembling a human. And I looked out the window to see the massive hoofprints in the frost-covered earth. "Oh, Jesus Christ," I said softly. I walked into the kitchen to use the phone to call for help, and I dialed 911 and waited for a moment for the operator to pick up. 911, what's your emergency? I finished explaining how I was a detective and that there was a murder at the police station, and an old couple by the name of Anne and Joseph Therold. Okay, sir, we're dispatching paramedics from your county now, but the police are coming from a different county now, so it will take longer, okay? Can you stay where you are? The operator asked me. Yeah, I can stay here, I said, my voice cracking with anxiety. I slumped into the kitchen counter and began to sob again. Why is this happening? I had so many questions, but they were not being answered. But then I thought of something worse. What if the thing that killed the police station made it to the city? I had to stop it, but I didn't know how. I looked at the notes that Jack had left me and realized something. It was fucking Morse code. I googled a Morse code alphabet and realized what Jack was trying to tell me. W-E-N-D-I-G-O. Normally I would have called him insane, but after witnessing what had just happened, I realized it made sense. Well, it mostly made sense, other than the fact it was a fucking mythical creature. All of a sudden, my eyes shot wide open, and I realized Samuel Monroe was not one of the bodies I saw at the station massacre. I waited for 2 hours for the ambulance to arrive, but it never did. I decided to investigate and grabbed an old shotgun off the wall of the house. I realized it would have been illegal, but then remembered that a mass murder of the whole town would have been more illegal. And so I decided to take one for the team. I walked down to my car to see that the tires were torn from the axles. I noticed a bike hanging on the side of a torn-up RV in the driveway and took it. I pedaled quickly to the hospital. It was unmoved at the top of the massive hill. I noticed a shredded ambulance tipped on its side. "Oh no!" I yelled, and then ran to the ambulance only to see the mangled bodies of the paramedics inside. I ran up the slanted hill road to the hospital to see people running and screaming from the hospital. I took the shotgun off my shoulder and pumped it. A man in front of me was tackled by something so fast it was a blur. In the blur, I noticed a massive clawed hand. Another person got into their car to drive away, but the thing landed on top of it from the trees. I saw it clearly now. It was 10 feet tall, with a brown fur mane running down its back, with long claws and a deer-like head, and with the skin so tight it gave off the illusion of a skull. Its massive antlers had a 5-foot span. Its feet were chipped and cracked hooves. I shook my head and began blasting it with a shotgun, and it hissed in aggravation and put its arm up to shield itself. And I continued firing until it roared. It roared so loud the windshields near it shattered. It was a primal roar, the roar of an animal. It ran towards me but recoiled back screeching in pain. I looked behind me to see an overweight man in his 20s and with curly black hair and glasses firing a revolver and with the bullets leaving behind a trail of flames. "Get back now! Go while you still can!" he yelled. The creature retreated into the woods, and amongst the chaos I was knocked over by a group of men. I saw the man walk up next to me and extend his hand. "The name's Damien. My uncle encountered something similar 2 years ago." An Apex Predator. Part 2. Let's get straight into that. Police sirens wailed in the distance as I stood with a man in the light of the street lamps. He held out a hand and gestured to his car. "Come with me," he said, getting into the car. No way. You had to answer me first. How did you know that My uncle encountered one on a search and rescue mission. Well, he said to me that incendiary rounds would kill it or hold it back, depending on where you hit it, he said, gesturing to a seat next to him. I hesitantly got into the car and he sped off onto the highway before the police arrived. He drove ahead and it began raining. "So, where's your uncle?" I asked. He kept his eyes forward and remained emotionless. "He died by the monster we just saw," he said finally. I looked at him in shock. How? I thought he knew how to kill one. I yelled and he snickered. "Just because you know how to kill something does not mean you are invincible," he said, still staring ahead. I felt stupid. I felt like I needed to say something, but he just stared forward, focusing on the winding road. "I know where he's going next. He's going back to where this started. He's going back to the fucking cabin." "The cabin? Wait, I'm so fucking confused. Why a cabin?" I asked. He pulled the car over in front of a house. The windows were slightly illuminated by yellow lights. He got out the car and beckoned me to come with him. I followed close behind and he opened the door. Inside was a living room with a large flat-screen TV and 2 couches. He gestured to the kitchen, where he pulled out 2 chairs and sat down in one. "So, you're the last officer alive in this county?" he asked. "Yes, my name is Matthew Drake," I replied after a short pause between us. Damien shut the lights to the house off. For precaution. Once I found out that this thing exists, I invested in stockpiles of incendiary rounds from illegal dealers. And I've been trying to keep them at bay, but the rounds only seem to be making them angrier, Damien said. Them? I asked, surprised. Yes, when my uncle and his group had faced these Wendigos before, he encountered 3 of them. They had killed all 3 of them, until my friend at the time, Sam, Andrew and I went into the woods to look for the cabin. When we found it, a dead one was still there, and it sprayed blood when it was touched by Sam. My uncle scolded us and took us back to my camp with him and the other 2 survivors of the incident. A Wendigo found us and killed one of the 3 original survivors. My uncle killed that thing, and we went on with our life. Except for Sam. He grew more aggressive until eventually he killed my uncle, Damien said, polishing the barrel of a shotgun. So, what about the 3rd man? I asked, and he looked up at me. Jack was thought to have been killed by that thing, but he survived. Well, he was hospitalized, and that's why he was there. He was there to finish what he had started 2 years ago. But he failed because I got there just in time, Damien replied. I couldn't believe I was talking to the last survivor of these maulings. Oh, there was a crash outside of the house. No, there was loud footsteps outside of the house. Damien grabbed me and threw us both down onto the ground. The rain outside turned to a blizzard, and there was a loud tapping on the window. I noticed long bony fingers running along the frame of its frost-covered window. Damien combat crawled through the kitchen and to a large faded green metal door. He slammed down onto the knob and pointed aggressively towards the pitch-black staircase. And I crept slowly to the entrance when there was a sound of splintering wood and cracking at the front of the house. There was a crashing sound above us as well, along with a sound of claws slipping and a loud thud outside. I chuckled to myself a little, knowing that the thing had slipped off the roof, but then went right back into a state of panic and anxiety as I made my final lunge towards the door. Damien slammed the door behind me. He then turned on a single light bulb and revealed a stockpile of shotguns and revolvers. Take your pick. I grabbed a double-barreled shotgun and aimed down the sights. He handed me a red box with a flame logo on it. Incendiary, like I've been talking about. Use them wisely, Damien said, loading a sawed-off shotgun with the incendiary shotgun shells. They called him Dragon's Breath, and I'm inclined to agree. I added, and he smiled at me blandly. The room was filled with metal scraping, turning slowly into metal being torn apart. Oh no, Damien said. A hole appeared in the metal door, and a hollow yellow eye appeared on the other side of the door. Damien fired a shot, but missed entirely, and nailed the bolt of the door. Fuck! He yelled. I aimed my shotgun and fired once, hitting the creature in the eye. I had recoiled and screeched in pain. The sound of its screech was unholy, worse than the devil itself. I fired again and hit it again, but then there was more crashing above us, and the creature crashed onto the floor next to us. You fucking moron! You didn't make sure this place was secured, I yelled. He just stared at the creature in the eyes, which held it at bay. The second creature burst the other door down and roared in anger. This is it, I said to Damien, and he shook his head. When I say get down, you get down and crawl through that vent. It's not screwed in, he said while not breaking eye contact with the Wendigo. He slowly reached for the lever, and the creatures shook their heads and darted forward. Damien slammed his hand down onto the lever, and the room began to burst into flames. He pushed me into the ventilation system, and we both crawled through the vent that was quickly filling with black smoke. The vent led outside, where a Wendigo smashed through a window and landed on all fours. It was the one from earlier. Sam, Damien said calmly, and the creature raised its long arm but hesitated. Sam, this isn't you. The Wendigo staggered back but quickly recovered and swiped at us. Damien fired a bullet into its chest, which caused it to stagger backwards and whimper in pain. He turned and then led me to the car, where we got in quickly. A Wendigo landed on top of the car and burst its hand into the car and grabbed at us blindly. I loaded it shut and cracked open a window, and it snarled at me and shoved the creature off the roof of the car as we sped off. I can't do this shit. I'm a detective, not a goddamn monster hunter. I yelled and Damien swerved the car on a narrow portion of the road, just barely missing the ditch. You think I was? I was just a dude who wanted clout. I didn't want this. I didn't want my uncle dying to my best friend. I didn't want the death of several police officers. I didn't want to see the shit I've seen. He screamed, and the car was slipping, and the windshield was being blocked by the heavy amount of snow. Wendigo then jumped onto the back of the car, and Damien sped up and knocked the creature off, but it still hung on, scraping itself on the road and leaving a long trail of black blood in the snow. I grabbed my shotgun again and fired directly into its skull, causing its head to explode into a black and green mess. Shit, they're catching up, Damien said, swerving the car again as another 2 Wendigos followed close behind. I tried to take aim, but the snow was blowing into my face now, and I couldn't see clearly. Then we were T-boned by a massive bipedal creature with antlers at a span of 16 feet. Damien grabbed a can of deodorant lying on the floor, along with a lighter. He used it to make a makeshift flamethrower and melt the massive creature's face, causing it to retreat. Then the 2 Wendigo approached us, but all of a sudden they stopped and looked on in confusion. We turned to see a man with cloth covering his face. They wore black sunglasses and a large black winter coat. He pulled out a Molotov cocktail and lit it. The 2 Wendigo hissed and snarled at the man, and he threw the cocktail, creating a pool of flames, separating us from the 2 beasts. The man took out another 2 Molotovs and flung them directly onto the giant Wendigo. It was set ablaze in seconds, and its skin melted off of its body and pooled on the ground like tacky molasses. He took out a revolver and fired incendiary rounds into the other 2 Wendigos, causing them to retreat. We both just stood there in shock as the man approached us. He held out a hand similar to Damien. Come, now. We don't have much time. We need to stop them all before they get to Vancouver and move from there, the mysterious man said. And Damien looked at the man with disbelief. Uncle Kobe? In the flesh. Well, actually not, Kobe said. His arms snapped and contorted into long white arms and tipped the car back onto its wheels. Get in. I'll tell you everything. Kobe gestured to the car and Damien took a step back. What better chance do we have? I asked, and he nodded slowly, and we approached the car. And Kobe gestured to Damien to drive while he sat in the back seat. When I was called by Sam to come and fix what was wrong with him, I expected to be able to stop what was happening. But I was already too late. He lost it and killed me in a goddamn cornfield. When I woke up, I was in a black space and with stars in the distance. It was like I was in a pool of water. In the distance, I saw Sam. He was crying about how he did not mean it. I wanted to comfort him, but my hands went through him. That was when I realized I may have had the chance to fix it. I closed my eyes and focused on going back to this plane of existence, but I was so at peace I didn't want to leave. I had to resist. I had to end this. I returned to this mortal world and went to Jack. I ensured that he did not die, but I couldn't keep him in fighting condition. And so I realized I needed to take matters into my own hands. I went back to the sides of the cabin and found the original King Wendigo corpse in pieces, just as we had left it. I pieced it together and took the vessel for myself. I am barely able to hold myself together as I am controlling a dead cryptid. I ain't strong enough to kill one. I'm just as strong as the man I once was. If I use the full amount of strength, I risk losing my vessel. Kobe finished. And Damien just stared at the twirling blizzard outside while he drove in silence. He looked uneasy. "Why did you go to him? You knew the risks," I said, and Kobe grunted in pain. I looked back to see Kobe begin to vomit black blood, and he looked up at me. "My time is short. This needs to end fast. Damien, you know where to go?" Kobe said, continuing to vomit. "Yes, I know we need to go to the cabin," Damien replied. "No, where this all started, all of this. We need to go back to the campsite where me and my team first encountered it. They are waiting for me, for us. They want to finish the job once and for all," Kobe said. He looked at me and Damien with a grim expression. "Why the trail?" I asked. "That was where they discovered my crew when the cabin was destroyed. The Wendigo are in that general area," Kobe replied. "All right then, let's end this." An apex predator. The finale. Let's get straight into that. The snow was creating a deep white sheet on the forest floor, and Kobe walked ahead of us while me and Damien followed close behind. We came to a campsite where there were deep claw marks etched into the spruce trees. The tents were gone, and all that remained to show it was a campsite was an ash-filled fire pit. Then Kobe knelt over and examined a dark brown stain on a piece of white cloth embedded in the fire pit. "Dried blood," was all Kobe said. Well, there were the sounds of twigs cracking behind us. We turned to see a rabbit running through the white forest floor. And Kobe sighed with relief when all of a sudden a massive hand reached from the bushes and crushed the bunny, leaving nothing but a red smear in the snow. The Wendigo revealed itself, towering over us at a height of at least 15 feet.
"Well, Detective Matthew, didn't expect you to show up here. You can leave now, and I might give you a quick death,"
the being said, and I clenched my shotgun and the thing snickered.
"I jest. None of you are coming out of this alive. After I'm done with the last survivors, then we can finally move on to our bigger target. A food source for years,"
it exclaimed, and Kobe sneered and Damien took an aiming stance.
"Since Kobe killed our king, the spot was left open. I fought my way to the top as usual. I will get to that city. I am an apex predator, something no one can beat,"
it continued, and Kobe began to show fear and took a single step backwards. The moonlight illuminated the massive antlers of the Wendigo and his shining yellow eyes. "Sam, you can fight it, can't you?" Damien yelled, and the creature howled with laughter.
"I was never Samuel. He lost control long ago. I was toying with you for fun."
It laughed, loud enough to break glass. It glanced back at us with a look of insanity. It took a wild swing at us, and Kobe grabbed both of us and threw us to the ground as the Wendigo's arm swung over our heads. Damien fired his shotgun, and the Wendigo retracted. It screeched so loud it made my ears literally bleed. It jumped up into the trees and began mocking us.
"Kobe, you could have saved us,"
a voice of an older man said. "Damien, why did you let it take over?" a young man's voice said. I knew it was going to mock me next. "Matthew, why did you let me go with them? Why did you let me die?" It was my wife. I began to feel tears trickling down my face. "Hey Matt, don't worry buddy, it's just a trick to deceive you," Kobe yelled, aiming his gun wildly around in the trees above.
"You cannot stop me from getting to the city,"
it said in an older man's voice, and Kobe screamed in anger and fired a shell into a tree, setting it ablaze. The Wendigo screamed and fell to the ground, where it snarled like a rabid dog and looked up and then retreated farther into the woods. And Kobe sprinted into the woods after the Wendigo, me and Damien following close behind. The Wendigo jumped from another tree on top of me, and Kobe grabbed it and held it into a spruce tree, the smoke filling the air as the fire spread in the forest.
"You won't beat me,"
the Wendigo said smugly. Kobe narrowed his eyes and Damien fired both bullets in the barrel of his shotgun, causing the Wendigo to fall over. Kobe took the axe off his back and charged forward. He slammed the axe into the bullet wound and began to pull down. The Wendigo screamed again, causing me to collapse to the ground, writhing and covering my ears in pain. Damien collapsed unconscious from the pain. "You can't hurt a ghost," Kobe said coldly before slamming the axe into the Wendigo's face. It grabbed him and smashed his head against a sharp rock, exposing the brains behind his head.
"Then what did I just do then?"
The Wendigo smiled, and Kobe smiled right back. "Provided distraction." A burning branch fell on top of the Wendigo, and Kobe picked up the burning branch. I could see it begin to blister his hands. "The thing about possessing something is that I cannot feel pain," he said. He turned around and stepped on top of the Wendigo, trying to retreat. And there was a snickering before the next thing I saw was Kobe being slammed into the ground repeatedly and then thrown like a ragdoll into the blazing trees. Damien jumped on top of the Wendigo and slammed a large burning branch into the Wendigo's neck. It grabbed him by the shoulders and stared into his eyes. He screamed before the Wendigo bit his fucking head off. He ate Damien like a starving stray dog, blood and guts flying all around. He looked up at me and then laughed. If I were to meet Satan himself, or he would not compare to the true evil that was this beast. It picked me up by my head.
"Your biggest mistake in life was thinking you could stop the inevitable. I am an apex predator. The world will know of our existence. We have been hiding for too long,"
it said, its jawbone snapping like a cartoon skeleton. It opened its jaws wide, revealing 2 more sets of shining white sharp teeth, and I grasped for anything with my limbs until my foot hit the strap of Damien's shotgun. I pulled it up and caught it in my hands. I fired the last shot into the Wendigo's mouth. It gagged and threw me back, and I realized I had my hand on the end of the barrel, causing my hand to become blistered and red, and so I stuffed it into the snow immediately. The heat of the forest fire burned my face. I heard coughing in the distance. I got up to run, but realized that the Wendigo I was missing. In its place, 3 appeared, much smaller than the other one. I closed my eyes and awaited the inevitable, but it never happened. Instead, I heard struggling noises and the snapping of twigs. A low growl was let out, and I peeked my eyes open to see what was going on. It was a massive white Wendigo, just slightly shorter than the other one we had faced. Its antlers were cracked and its eyes were sallow. It killed all 3 hostile Wendigos easily. It looked at me and approached me on all 4s. And I looked it dead in the eyes, but something was different. It had soul-filled eyes. It extended a long bony hand.
"Matthew, it's Kobe. I'm getting too weak to keep up my human form. The body I possess is getting too close to the breaking point, so this needs to end fast, so I can die peacefully," Kobe said. I looked on in shock as he loomed over me. "I still have the strength and speed, but not for long," he added. I nodded and we looked around for the Wendigo. "He's this way, trust me," he said. It led me to a waterfall marked off by decaying yellow and black police tape, and there, in the mud below, massive hoofprints were shown
lining the shore and up to the ledge of the waterfall. Kobe grabbed me and jumped over the ledge of the waterfall, and there was a large opening behind the waterfall. It was pitch black. In the darkness, I noticed two glowing yellow eyes peering out from the darkness.
"How dare you come back to the resting place? My team were tortured enough!"
Kobe yelled. An inhuman noise responded, like the rapid clicking of a keyboard, but more organic. It slowly crawled out on all fours and smiled cruelly. Kobe stood tall, his broken antlers scraping on the rock ceiling.
"You cared for her, didn't you? I know because I witnessed you. She loved you, and you loved her. You dearly cared for Charlotte, didn't you, Matthew?"
He laughed. My eyes widened. "No, you didn't! You fucking bastard!" I screamed, and Kobe looked at me with an expression that could be related to that of shock. It all made sense now. I remember that day. Kobe was the leader of the search and rescue team that my wife Charlotte was in. They gave in a call one day. A man with red hair came and introduced himself as Carlton and told me my wife had died of a bear attack. I remember I fell into a spiral of alcohol and depression afterwards. I couldn't stand the pain anymore. I was outcasted and shamed by her family for being a washed-up drunk. When the chain of murders began, I made a promise to find out who was behind it all. When we found the body of Detective Luke Harrison, I almost lost hope. That was until we found Samuel Monroe alive, but unresponsive in a ditch. I don't get it. His vitals and CT scans showed up, and nothing was wrong with him, the doctor said, spreading the files across his desk, and I looked in shock. I remember the last words he said to me. I only now remember them dripping with poison. "I am an apex predator." Wow. Certainly another one. Wow. First recording back since having a nasty chest infection and loss of my voice for a good week or so, guys. Hopefully the quality of that recording wasn't too bad. Of course, a huge thank you to the incredible author and friend of the show, REEzilla2005, from over on Reddit, No Sleep. Thanks ever so much, Ree, for giving me a heads up on this series, and once again you knocked it out of the ballpark. Of course, I really do look forward to more of your work in the future, and I hope you enjoyed my rendition. Well, guys and girls as ever, you know the drill. Please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help both the channel and our community further. Why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid Crew. If you're an aspiring writer or would just like to have a crack at things like myself, then please do get in touch with me at the contact email, which is, as on screen, contactthedeadone@gmail.com. I really look forward to hearing from you. I hope everybody's had a fantastic week at school or work, whatever it is that you do, and you're trying to stay fit and focused. But above all, guys, remember, be safe, not sorry.